Well, hope everyone's doing well and enjoying the evening. It was a beautiful day here in eastern Pennsylvania. In the middle of May, already in the low to mid 80s. Actually, the mid to upper 80s, if I'm not mistaken. Absolutely beautiful day. And obviously it's cooling off. If you can see that in our new 2023 Super Duty with the heads-up display, it actually includes a temperature readout on the right side there. If you can see that, it says it's 71 degrees. This heads-up display is extremely well executed, as you would expect from Ford, as opposed to something like the one that we saw in the what was it, the 2022 Suburban that we drove about a year ago, and it was just kind of half-assed and not that impressive, and it gave you like your speed and maybe one or two things, and it just wasn't that useful. But with the heads-up display in the 2023 Super Duty, which we assume will be making its way across Ford's lineup, at least in the F-150 probably, when it goes through a mid-cycle refresh, which may happen next year. It tells you a bunch of stuff, and it's actually news you can use. It's all useful information. Sorry about the bumps here. We're still getting used to the suspension on this truck. It is a 14,000 pound gross vehicle weight rating, class 3 pickup with a live axle front and rear, dually suspension obviously, or dually rear end, and our Duramax rode a lot smoother than this. It obviously has an independent front end, and it's rated for 13,000 pounds, which is like 5,000 in the front and 8,000 in the rear axle. This truck is rated for 14,000 pounds, and the front axle will go to 5,600, I think. The rear axle will go to 9,900. So obviously you can't max out the front and rear at the same time, because that'll take you to 15,500, if I calculated that right. And that is above the GVWR, the gross vehicle weight rating of 14,000. So you will at least be asking for legal trouble, if not safety trouble. But yeah, every time you drive this thing, it makes it abundantly clear to you that you are driving a truck with a very heavy-duty suspension. The curb weight, by the way, we just weighed it in. It's 8,700 pounds. It's exactly 5,000 in the front and 3,700 in the rear, with one passenger, a quarter tank of fuel, and basically no cargo. In any case, the heads-up display that you see there is, like I said, it's very impressive. It shows up best on the camera at night, but you can read it just fine in broad daylight. You just can't see it in the camera if I was to make a video of it during broad daylight. But in the at nighttime, it shows up a lot better on the camera. And one of the things that we just noticed yesterday, after driving this truck a couple hundred miles, is that it doesn't just have a speedometer and your brackets on the left and right, which indicate lane keeping or lane centering is taking place. It doesn't just have a speed limit sign. It doesn't just have a thermometer on the right there and the clock on the bottom left, but it also shows you your driving directions. If you are using certain navigational apps, okay? We don't tend to use Apple Maps because we think Google Maps gives you a lot better directions. Case in point, this morning, Apple Maps wasted 25-30 minutes of our time, taking us on a route that was the completely wrong route to take, because Apple Maps can't really predict what traffic is going to be like at various points on your route. It knows the traffic right now, and it'll give you a route based on the traffic that is taking, you know, that's on the route at that exact moment. But Google does a lot better at telling you, okay, based on all of our historical knowledge, we think we know what the traffic is going to be like at each point on your route at the time when you're passing through that point on your route. So, you know, rush hour starts in a half an hour. Rush hour traffic picks up in a half an hour. Okay, in a half an hour, you'll be at this particular spot on your route. okay, it's probably going to be pretty heavy, so maybe we should take you a different way. And that's one of the many things we like about Google Maps. That's why we tend to use it. But just for scientific purposes, we were running a test this morning with Apple Maps, and no, you can say what you want in the comments, but we have had nothing but good luck with Google Maps, and it just seems like it does a lot better job of giving you realistic directions. And so again, if you notice it, second from the left, on the very left, on the bottom, you have your clock readout, which tells you that it's 9:28 p.m. On the second from the left, you've got your navigation directions. And we'll jump off here for a second. But it tells you your next turn that's coming up. And we'll see if Apple Maps is smart enough here to detect that we've jumped off the highway. Okay, it has. And look what it's telling you. It's telling you continue on to Pennsylvania 33 North, straight ahead and 30 feet. And so that's kind of neat, that your heads-up display actually has your turn-by-turn directions in it. And the reason why is that a lot of people mute. A lot of people will tend to turn down the volume on their navigational directions because they don't like that voice kind of popping off every couple minutes and telling you to take a right when you know you're going to take a right. And so they'll mute the voice commands or the voice activated, or the voice prompts to do your turns. And sometimes that'll euphemistically speaking, that'll bite you in the ass if you don't actually know the route that you're going, and you've got the voice turned down on your turn-by-turn directions, and you're not paying attention to the navigational screen, because most people don't tend to look down, a lot while they're driving and stare at the screen, even though it is a very good-looking 12-inch screen. And you don't really tend to look down at the dashboard that much, especially this digital dashboard that's very, very busy and kind of cluttered, which is another reason we don't like digital dashboards. They just get too jumped up. This one certainly isn't the worst. The one in the Suburban we drove last year was absolutely terrible. At least in this one, you can tell where the needles are. At a glance, you can tell we're at about 1700 RPMs. And even if that gigantic number wasn't showing your speed there, you could tell we were, 60, 70 miles an hour. With the Suburban and the GM trucks, I think the heavy duty has the same type of display. It's got like a teeny tiny little needle that just sort of gets lost. And it sort of fades in with all the other junk that's on that screen, and so you have to like squint at it just to tell your speed and your RPMs. But with this Ford heads-up display, basically all the information you need is right there, staring you in the face, to the point where you just don't need to look down that much, or hardly at all. And again, the fact that it will give you your turn-by-turn directions is pretty damn impressive. As long as you're using Apple Maps. All right, it does not do that with your Google Maps. If you can hear that little beeping sound, that's the Apple Watch telling you to make your turn also. So it kind of like beeps at you, and it vibrates a little, so that if you didn't already see the prompt on your heads-up display, and you weren't looking at the center stack there, or I should say the the instrument panel, and you weren't looking at the navigational screen, which you shouldn't be really, it tells you in your heads-up display to do it, to make the turn. So you get like 4 chances to make your turn. The navigational screen, the dashboard, or the instrument panel, I should say, the heads-up display, and your watch is like beeping at you. So if you miss a turn driving this truck, you got serious problems. Again, as long as you're using Apple Maps or the Ford navigation, the factory navigation, which we never ever use. The reason your Google Maps does not give you turn-by-turn directions in the heads-up display or in your instrument panel is because Google Maps has to communicate through Apple Carplay to the vehicle. And do you think Apple is going to let Google Maps talk through CarPlay to the vehicle? Absolutely not. They're not going to make it easy for you to use a competitor's product. They want you to use their own product, which is their navigational package, which again, in our minds, is not a superior product, it's an inferior product. But in any case, there it is. It's just kind of neat to see your turn-by-turn directions in the heads-up display. And as stated, it's a very, very useful heads-up display. Sorry you can't see it too clearly, but it's clear as day when you're looking at it. It like projects to where it's like a hologram, and it appears to be just sort of on the just forward of where the front edge of the hood is. So maybe 6 or 8 feet in front of the driver. Very, very impressive, very clear, very legible. The speed limit sign is kind of nice. And when the speed limit changes, it sort of flashes a little bit at you to alert you that there's a change happening. And if it knows that there's a change coming up, it'll sort of indicate that as well. To the right and left, you see sort of coming in and out of the picture, sometimes the truck can tell where the lane dividers are. And when it does, it'll show you in the form of a bracket to the left and right of the display there. And if you're wondering the difference between lane keeping and lane centering, so lane keeping is this. Look on the right there. You see how it just turned yellow? It went from white to yellow. Okay, now it's white again. And look at it again on the right. Okay, it just turned yellow again. And what that means is that the system detected the fact that we were drifting out of our lane, and it bumped us back into the lane. It gave the steering like a nudge to get us back into the lane. And that's lane keeping. Lane centering is what we're doing now, where we turn on the cruise control and the 2 brackets turn blue, and it's doing all the steering for you. So it is keeping you centered in the lane, or what, you know, if you're driving a Tesla, what would be called autopilot. It is actively steering every second that it's engaged when you're using lane centering. And again, when you're using lane keeping, all it's doing is bumping you back into the lane when it detects that you are drifting out of the lane. And that's the difference between the two. When you're using lane centering, if you've got lane centering engaged, otherwise known as autopilot, or what you might call self-driving, lane keeping is kind of superfluous at that point, and so it's not going to do lane keeping. It only does lane keeping when you don't have lane centering activated. So I'll pull over here in a second and show you the other modes that you can use for this the heads-up display, because there's a couple. There's actually 3 different modes. Again, you feel every single bump in this truck. It's not going to rattle your teeth, and thank God we didn't get the FX4 package, because that would have made it even worse. Most people do not need the FX4 package. Kind of like we said earlier that most people don't need the high output power stroke. There is no need for the high output power stroke. It's really almost an ego trip on the part of Ford to be the first company to make a truck with 1,200 pound-feet of torque. All right, so this is the HUD menu, the heads-up display menu, and it'll show you automatic, which will go from normal to tow haul to off-road, depending what drive mode you're in. Or you can say, put me in tow haul mode on the heads-up display, even though I haven't activated tow haul mode in the drive mode selector. So here's what tow haul mode looks like in the HUD. And you'll be able to see it here in a minute. Okay, so tow haul mode has a couple of pieces of information that are not visible in the previous mode that we showed you. On the left, you've got an orange indicator that says D2, and that means it's in drive and it's in second gear. Now you see it's in third. And above it, in kind of small, it's kind of small. Well, now it's a lot bigger. But it shows you your turn-by-turn navigation. When you're about to make a turn, it sort of pops up in the middle there. And then along the bottom in the middle, it's got a tachometer, which generally speaking is going to be between 1,000 and 2,000 when you're driving. You don't need to rev the hell out of this truck. It makes all the power you're ever going to need between 1,000 and 2,000 RPMs. Call it 1,500 and 2,000. We're going to make our turn early. And then it's going to recalculate, make a correction. And again, the difference between this one and normal mode that we were showing you earlier is that this one has your gear indicator, which to some extent is important, depending how much of a load you're dragging behind you. And it shows your tachometer, which is kind of nice. And then on the right, it shows your speedometer. And it shows the speed limit sign to the right of that. It does not show your clock or your thermometer. And so that's tow haul mode. And then there's one more mode here. You also see your turn signal showing up in the HUD. The final mode is called off-road mode, and you are virtually never going to need to use that. Okay, so here's off-road mode. We'll let this car go ahead of us. Okay, so off-road mode shows you a couple interesting pieces of information. On the far left, it shows your steering angle, if you can see that. All right, on the far left in the top, it's going like from 0 to 1 to 0 to whatever it is. And then below that is like a schematic of the drivetrain. And what it's showing you is that we are in 2 high right now. And we're in D1, which means drive in first gear. And then in the center, you've got those 2 things that look like parentheses. And that is that's your roll angle. Okay, how much you are tilting to the left and right. And then on the far right, it's got your pitch angle, which shows how much you're, how much of a slope you're driving up or down. And then along the bottom, it's got your tachometer, if you can see that. Let's put it in neutral for a minute. So you can see your RPMs. And I guess the theory is that this is what you're going to be using when you're doing like technical off-roading. and going up and down steep slopes. Rock crawling in Utah and the red rocks or something. Nothing we really ever plan to spend a lot of time doing. Not in this truck. It does not tell you the time of day. It does not tell you the exterior temperature. And it also doesn't give you your turn-by-turn directions. And I guess they figure, well, that's because you're not going to be needing turn-by-turn directions when you're using this thing, because you're going to be in a canyon somewhere or on a trail somewhere. So here you see we're going down a 3 degree downslope. And we've got a bit of a tilt there. You see that? We're tilted 4 degrees to the left. Or I should say that's our roll angle. And then our pitch angle is 3 degrees downward. If you can make sense of that. And then our steering angle is what it is. Anyway, that's the third and final readout on the heads-up display. And in our opinion, the least useful, because we, you know, you turn middle age and you don't have that much of a need to go out there and climb boulders in your vehicle anymore, or see if you can get it stuck in a mud pit somewhere. It's just, you know, not that exciting anymore. Anyway, hope you all have a pleasant evening, and we are continuing to discover new and interesting and impressive features on this truck. Very impressive. Something else we'll pass along, because we are new to the 6.7 Power Stroke. The transmission, I guess, tends to run a little bit hot in this truck, and that's because it doesn't have a traditional air to liquid transmission cooler. It's got, like, the transmission is cooled by virtue of a heat exchanger that that takes heat out of the transmission oil, and it puts it into the engine coolant. And hang on a second, we'll show you that again. And so if the coolant is like 189 degrees, that is what the transmission is using to cool itself. So it's not going to be below 189 degrees. It's going to be above at all times because of the heat that the transmission is generating. And it kind of alarmed us the first time we saw it, because we were driving down level ground on the highway, on the interstate, with no trailer, going like 60, 65 miles an hour. And the transmission temp just started creeping up. And then we did some research and started digging into it, and it turns out no. At least the 10-speed on the Power Stroke, if not the previous 6-speed, it just tends to run a little bit hot. And once you understand the reason why, it's not that big a deal. But it can be a little bit startling if like us, you are new to this powertrain, to this engine and transmission. And so we're just learning a whole lot about this vehicle, and its very impressive capabilities. The 10-speed shifts great. The engine makes tremendous power and torque, effortless power and torque. We have not, well, we put about a 3,000-pound trailer on it this morning. Just our little 12-foot bumper pull. Obviously, you couldn't even feel it back there. And compared to our Cummins and compared to our Duramax 6.6, I should say our 5.9 Cummins and our 6.6 Duramax, this 6.7 Power Stroke, it is a rocket. It has inexhaustible reserves of horsepower and torque, which once again makes it kind of ridiculous that they offered the high output version with the 500 horsepower and 1,200 pound-feet of torque, because for 99% of heavy-duty truck buyers, you are never going to be in a situation where 475 horsepower and 1,050 pound-feet of torque are not sufficient to meet your needs, to where you just think, God, I wish I had 1,200 pound-feet of torque. That's only about a 10-12% increase from the standard output power stroke in terms of torque. And in terms of power, it's like, again, it's going from 475 to 500. That's like maybe a 5% increase, and you're paying a 25% premium over the price of the standard 6.7 power stroke, which is $10,000. So you're paying another $2,500 to get another 25 horsepower. It does not seem like a good investment in our minds. Ford has a lot of options on this truck that are very, very expensive, some of which are well worth the money, and some of which are Ford just finding more ways to take your money because they can. And that high output power stroke, again, to us is a preposterous waste of money. You'll notice that the commercial spec, the cabin chassis F450 and F550, they have a D-rated 6.7 power stroke, so they don't even have the horsepower and torque of the standard output that comes in the pickup truck versions. The one we're driving now, 400, what did I say, 475 and 1050. They have like a D-rated version of it, essentially because they know it's going to be running at high load and high boost at all times, and they don't want to break the transmission and the axles and the differential if some driver starts abusing it. So anyway, those are our thoughts about that, and once again, this super impressive heads-up display. Anyway, have a great evening, everyone, and we will talk to you later.